Mr. McCarthy, thank you for joining us here on KZGN-TV. You gave a very stirring speech there about the Washington crossing the Delaware, which I didn't know that story. But anyway, I wanted to ask you some questions, and one of them you brought up during your speech to the people about the Iran deal. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, to me, this is the most important item we have before us. If Iran is allowed to have a nuclear weapon, the world will be different. I'm going to Israel just next week, taking a group of members and walking through. To me, this agreement is unacceptable. I'm not opposed to negotiating with Iran. I'm opposed to this deal. It allows them to have ballistic missiles. Why do you need a ballistic missile? Because that's not to shoot at Israel, that's to shoot at America. We should be able to have investigations or inspections anytime, which we do not have. Why would we supply Iran with the amount of money? This is going to be a bigger bailout than Greece got. Right now, Iran funds terrorists. They're in 4 different capitals. To me, this is not the place. And Iran needs an agreement. We do not. We can have a stronger agreement that makes the world safe and makes America in a stronger position.
Right. There's some talk in the news that there's secret agreements that even Kerry doesn't even know about.
Yes,
and that was strange.
There are 2 agreements. It deals with the international group, and we haven't even seen it. I've been in classified briefings, been asking about these. How can you even start the clock ticking if you have not seen these agreements?
Right. Yeah, it's just amazing what we find out as we go along instead of knowing the picture right up front.
Well, what's even interesting more, if half of the Congress, more than half the majority, votes against this agreement, the president says he's going to veto and still put it into effect.
Right.
When you have the majority of Americans opposed to this agreement.
Right.
I think the more Americans see about this agreement, the more they'll be opposed to it.
Right. Well, I certainly agree with you there. Another subject, you started talking briefly about the campaign for president.
Yes.
And all the candidates. What do you think about the large pool that we have?
Well, we've got a big pool of candidates on the Republican side. The one thing I would say is I don't believe the Democrats could get this big a field. So that's a positive on that end. I hope they look about the vision and foreign policy. I think those 2 issues will be the ones that define who's going to become president. It's still very early, and always in this time, people in the lead and people below, but remember, Ronald Reagan didn't start leading until New Hampshire. So it's good to have a debate, it's good to have an argument, and I think that's what we want to see.
Mm-hmm. And I got to ask the question, what do you think about the excitement about Trump?
Well, Trump has an interesting take. I think he's just fearless. People want to see their leader to be fearless. They want to see people to have a compass. There's a difference when you look at some of the things he says. I don't think the public... I disagree with when it comes to POWs. I think POWs to me are heroes.
They are.
And they always will be. If you're going to be commander-in-chief, I think you have to believe the same. Mm-hmm. But I think economic. People are looking for jobs. They want somebody that can create jobs. Mm-hmm. So those who are also running should look at the way he delivers his message and also what he's talking about. I think that's important to people.
Right, yeah. When they start saying, you hear the pundits talking about, well, it must be just because they want somebody that fights. And because they're not so sure that Congress is willing to fight.
Well, there's a great frustration about this current president mm-hmm. and what he's done and how he's gone around the system. And I know we fought him in a lot of different ways, and we'll continue that. We just would like to have somebody else join with us.
Yes, and this campaign is really going to be a big step going towards where this country goes.
Exactly. And I don't think Hillary is the person that could take us in that direction.
Yeah. You think Joe Biden's going to get in?
I don't know. That's very interesting that even the Democrats are not happy with Hillary, so yeah. We will see.
It would be interesting if he did get in, though. All right, another subject would be is you started talking about water.
Yes.
Okay. And that's very important.
Very important.
And I was tracking the bill that you did pass recently, and how can we get Sacramento to do something? I think that's part of our problem.
Well, we do. We need Sacramento to do something because they haven't. The first thing we needed to do is build more storage.
Yes.
Just 5 years ago, we had 172% of snowpack. If we would have stored more water then, we'd be in a different position today. We need to be able to have movement through the Delta so we can move water down to Central Valley and to Southern California. We need to protect our water rights. That's important as well. I think the bill we have is common sense, and it puts us in a much stronger place. A lot of people are talking about maybe having an El Nino next year. Well, if we don't have the storage, we don't get the benefit. And one El Nino won't take away our problems. And California goes through this time and again. We've lived through many droughts before. We should have learned before to be better prepared. That's why 4 years ago, we passed bills to be better prepared, but the Senate wouldn't take them up. I'm hoping they take our bill up this time.
Yeah, that was one thing that I was noticing, that quite often the House is passing things, but the Senate isn't taking them up.
Yeah.
How do you get that to move?
Well, we're putting a lot more pressure, but what's most interesting, there's a lot of frustration out there, but they watch what the House has passed. People would say, yeah, that's what I want to see happen, and they watch the Senate stop a lot of things. So hopefully with this new Senate, we'll get more done.
I know one thing that a lot of our viewers ask about, especially in Ridgecrest areas, the anger over executive orders.
Oh, yes.
Okay. What they want the Republicans to fight against them.
Well, if you watch in the approach process, we stop a lot of those. There's supposed to be three co-equal branches. Right now, they're not co-equal. This president has gone around judicial. He's gone around legislative. But we have continued to fight, and we'll continue to fight. If you watch what we've gone after, the money we've cut. You look at the EPA, they have a smaller budget today than they had back in the 80s. We have gone after time and time again, but this president continues to try to go beyond the realms of his responsibilities.
Right. And now we have that thing where he's gonna, this week he's talking about expanding the illegal immigration.
Yeah, well, we've been able to stop that, and also with the courts.
Right.
We just have to make sure we keep it intact.
Right, and it's not that anybody's against immigration. That has nothing to do with it.
Well, for legal
immigration, exactly.
That's what we want to see.
And that's where a lot of people feel we need to go that way, and that's what they're looking for Congress to do for us.
And if you watch the bills we've passed, especially you look at these sanctuary cities, we've gone in to punish sanctuary cities because they're not upholding the federal law. Now we've had people die from an illegal shooting.
Right.
You watch with the president trying to have illegals come into the community. We want a legal immigration system. So we've passed to protect the border stronger. The Senate has ignored that.
Right. And you bring up Sanctuary City. Is the Congress going to take up Kate's Law?
Yes, and you watch, we've already passed one element as we go through.
Okay.
Yeah, but when we go back in, you'll see that element get brought up as well.
Is it going to be brought up in fall then, or?
Yes, but we've already gone after, made sure if these sanctuary cities embrace the sanctuary city, they should not get federal grants for their law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Encourage them not to do that as well.
Right. Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people that feel that and agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything you'd like to just say to our viewers one time?
Well, the one thing I want to tell all the viewers, thank you for the opportunity to serve. We may not agree 100% of the time, but my door is always open. I will always listen. I view Ridgecrest as my second home city, and I think Ridgecrest is important for many different reasons, but it's important to this country and it's important to this world because you cannot duplicate what this base does anywhere else in the world. And we got to make sure we protect that, but also we're going to see enhancement. That's been a lot of my work. You look from the direct hire, our work on locality pay, from cutting back what we've done. We're preparing this base for the 21st century and beyond. We're going to have 400 more people working at this base at the end of the year than we had before. The amount that we spent to this base is going to be up from 1.2 to 1.5 billion. This is not only an economic driver, it's also a security for our country. And we're going to make sure we do all of our part.
Thank you all very much. As you know, I count this as my second home, and I want you to know how far we've grown. Because I think the very first time I ever met Eric was in this room. And it was at a luncheon, and he was totally new to the city. And he came here, and I want you to know how much he has grown. He was wearing shorts, some t-shirt full of sweat. He'd just been working out in the yard. And he walks in the room, and there wasn't anybody else in shorts. And he turns and looks up at his good friend over here. He said, "You told me I could wear shorts." So he went from the back of the room to the front of the room, and we're glad that we had him. It's an honor to be with you. I want to give you a little update of where we are in Washington. Give you some ideas what I have from where I think we are locally and where we can go in the future. and give you perspective overall of where I see the nation going as a whole. I'm very excited that we have the Admiral here, and I'll be the first to tell you, I think he's the finest we've ever had. And I think he and Scott O'Neill have really set up looking at the base from the thought about what does the world look like 25, 30 years? And are we going to be prepared to be able to deal with it? And are we putting Ridgecrest and the base, including Point Magoo, in the right position to do the job that they're meant to do, to protect us around the world? And I will say the threats I see around the world, like we've heard so many times before, you can't duplicate what we have here. And when I see that the rest of the military seeing that, you're going to have 400 more people working at that base this year. That's going beyond attrition. That's 400 new people into the community. So when you're talking about housing, you're talking about education, talking about the others, these are things we've always talked about. And I see that we're pivotal in the right place. There's a few things that Eric mentioned about that I work very closely on the base. Are we prepared for the other things that we have to do in the future as well? Cutting back. You know, we look at where drones are going and others. Can we utilize the base for that? Be the pivotal point around the nation? The answer is yes, we got that done. Locality pay we have fought for how long? We are at our furthest point we've ever been. But if we're able to get that all the way through, it's a 13% raise. And we know we'll feel that around the community as well. Direct hire. One of the biggest problems we have, we've talked about it so many times before, the bathtub effect, right? We have all these bright minds on the base, but we've missed out, and now we've got to get these younger ones in to be able to be there. But it takes so long to hire within the federal government. But when we were able to direct and change direct hire, they've been able to make decisions very rapidly. So when you offer something to somebody, they can take it. When you're trying to get an engineer and others, there's a lot of places they can go. And you tell them, I'll have a job for you in like 3 months, you got to apply for it, and maybe you'll be able to get it. It doesn't work. Because we want to get the right people here for the community to be able to grow. And I see a big change right there. That's going to make a fundamental difference. Now there's things that I think we need to do as well, though, to make sure. Every place I have seen that's been able to grow, you take care of what's gotten there in the first place. So we have to have a very conscientious, how do we protect this base for the future, but how do we have advantage with it as well? You want to make sure they can do their mission. That way we were able to expand with Cutting Back and everywhere else. But I watched just what they did in July, when they had, they had Technology Day, you had the whole week here. And they did it outside the base, they did it in town. So they filled up the hotels and others. We have to make sure, though, when they're attracting other businesses, small businesses to grow, even if it's only 1 or 2 people. You know, Google started with 2 guys in a garage. You know how much further it can go. As a city, are we prepared that we have a one-stop shop? That we have our packet all ready to go, that if they decide they want to do their work, they want to be here, that we not only have the red carpet, we have every regulation in one package ready to answer. Because we don't want to miss any opportunities. That's what's going to enhance us where we go. That's why we got to make sure we do our work as well. And the other thing I was talking to the Admiral, quality of life. When we bring these new people in, there's 2 things. We want them to be a part of the community. We also want them to feel that they can add to the community as well. Their ideas, they're bright, they're young. They can help drive and make the community better quality of life. I'm excited about the work they've done to bring the USO here. I mean, think about that. So many times before, people come in and say, we need a better quality of life, and they expect us to do everything. They've gone out and they've got the USO coming here. We need to make sure that's a big community event. Because the quality of what it brings, and everybody should be involved. I know it's October 17th. We got the ball the night before. So we should really embrace that. Really go after where we go. But there's one other idea I was thinking about. I think Pat, you and I have talked about this before. When I was starting out, in Bakersfield, they have this thing called Leadership Bakersfield with the chamber. And I had to apply to get in. I think I was in the 6th class. And I had to dedicate one Friday every month. And there was only about 15 of us in it. And we did it for a complete year. And we studied different parts of the community every year. And you would think you knew all about your community, but you really don't. And this really forced us. But you know the uniqueness of it, those 15? It just so happens the person that's in my class, they're going to become the next police chief, even during the class, or the next editor of the paper, or the next principal. And we created a great friendship. But we also understood we came from different walks of life and different work, but we all had something that united us. We wanted a better life for our community. And then something else happened. Each group broke up in like 3 or 4 and had to do a project. So when I talk about like that one-stop shop, that could be a project for one of the classes. But what happened was it brought people from other parts of the community together, working, and brought different ideas. Like when we battled to have the museum, it shouldn't be the same people that were trying to do the museum there. And you always want some new ideas in. Now the one thing I would think, maybe we bring up today, how do we make sure we're preparing ourselves for 21st century? Why don't we take it upon ourselves with this chamber to make a leadership Ridgecrest? And you can do it each and every year, make people apply, but also what you'll get out of there, those projects, always forward-looking. And think about it, if the base brings somebody new, a new young engineer all by themselves. We want them to end up staying here, right? Married, have children, but they want to be in a community that they helped design as well. They could bring new ideas to the community. I think that would be a neat project. And anytime I know we're about to go back to school, teachers are already there, right? This is the time you start rethinking before the new year. We should think of those projects we should do, our goals that we should set ourselves to. And I'm more than willing to help with it. I'm more than willing to be a part of it. I know Vince went through Leadership Bakersfield as well. A lot of it, we should set that up of what we want and have that achieved. And that could be a great legacy for us to help. One of the projects could be behind, how do we help the museum? Yeah. What do we do about, how do we make sure, we're about ready to have a new school year for 5 kids. How do we draw from that? Let's be collective about it. I think that would be a great project. And anything that can help with the chamber to make it happen, I'm more than willing to do. Let me give you a little update in Congress. I know it looks terrible on the outside, but the good news is we're out of Congress right now. I'll tell you this. When I became majority leader, I decided that we're going to put measurements. And I'm going to let everybody know within Congress where you are and where you're going. And we're going to set goals. And we set out with 100 days, a year, 2 years, and 4 years. Knowing we can't achieve everything at once. The other thing I set a goal at, no longer are we going to have these cliffs. Cliffs are like how we dealt with the budget, whether the government's shutting down. That's not productive for anybody, right? Getting these clocks on TV. And cliffs really come about when you have, like if you're in the medical community, sustainable growth is called SGR. It's the payment to doctors and it deals with Medicare. And we've been trying to solve this problem for 14 years. And 17 times, Congress has just kicked it down the road. But in the end, it actually cost taxpayers more money by doing it. But you weren't solving a big issue. So that was the first cliff that came before us. You know what? We solved it forever. And in doing so, this is something that nobody writes about, but I believe history will begin to write about it. We got entitlement reform. And how many times have we sat in this room, talked about our goals of what we want for America, and that entitlement reform was one of the big things we have to do when it comes to the budget and our deficit. A report just came out that we're going to save $2.9 trillion based upon what we did inside SGR when it came to entitlement reform. But no one writes about that. I know they write about the ugly stuff. But when I went out and did the measurements in Congress for the first 7 months, and you take, in the modern history of all the Congresses, this is actually the second most productive. In Congress, we've had more bills passed. We've been more open. We've had more amendments on both sides. The average amendments you have after 7 months is about 125 amendments. We're 300 and something. 200 more over than average. We're above the average in number of bills passed, and we're above how many became law. A couple different other things that we looked at. Trade. Now, a lot of people wrote about, oh my God, there's some secret trade deal. There's no secret trade deal. What we talked about was trade promotion authority. So that the president couldn't just go negotiate a trade deal, that we actually had a check and balance to. You know, we always had trade promotion authority, but it went away in '07. Since that time, there's been 100 trade agreements, and America's been a part of 0. Now, if we want to take ourselves away from the world, we're not going to lead. But if we want other people to live to our standards, to be able to compete, we're going to have to engage. But what happens in politics today, people say, oh, there's some secret agreement. No, here's the bill, you can read it. And what it says is the president can't agree to anything unless it's been out there for 60 days, and the House has the ability to say yes or no to it. We've never had that before. But you have to push through the politics, at the same time push through the policy. You know what, the Democrats all disagreed to it. Because they wanted to just put walls around America and not compete other places. I firmly believe we have to compete, but we have to have a level playing field to do it. It makes us better. And we were able to get that done. 2 major accomplishments in a short amount of time. First time you ever have the House and the Senate in modern history both produce a balanced budget. The Senate last time they ever produced a budget when Democrats were in control. The Democrats, when they control the House, they didn't produce a budget. We produced one that actually balanced in 10 years. You know, every year the president has offered a budget. In all the years he's been president, if you add up all the yes votes for his budget, I think the total is 4. Never been passed. Because it never balanced. So people write about a lot of different things, about a lot of different battles, but I try to do the policy so people could actually look where we're going. Now, we got a long way to go, but in this short time, we started moving it in a much different direction. We started the appropriation process earlier than ever before. Sad part is the Senate's never done any. When you talk about the challenge of sequester and others, that's where the appropriate process, you can do something about it. That's why we got to finish it. When we go back in September, we'll have that challenge. Now, having said all that, I really want to talk about what the world looks like. Not from a partisan point of view, not from a Republican or Democrat, but mainly from an American point of view. Because I'm a firm believer history always repeats itself. And if you look at the today in America or around the world, a lot of people will talk about it looks like the time before maybe World War II or World War I. Some people argue that it even looks like maybe in the 50s after World War II, the setting of the Cold War. I actually believe we look at a different time. I think it's a lot like 1979, the late 70s. And this is my argument why. Think about it for the aspects of, I think we have a dysfunctional government. You know, but think about this. Millennials are the largest population in the workforce. I have 2 of them at home. Connor is going to be a senior at Georgetown, and Megan just graduated high school. They have never seen government be successful, right? They weren't here for World War II. They didn't get to see its challenge to go to the moon, and they didn't see Desert Storm. What have they watched? They watched the IRS go after people because of what they philosophically believed, and when they got caught, nobody was held accountable, right? They said they lost the emails and the person was able to retire. They watched the VA system that's supposed to care for those who defend our freedom be dysfunctional. And then when they found out they were dysfunctional, they hid the fact of the truth of the American public. They watched healthcare, and I think every millennial knows how to build a website. Spend billions of dollars and not even be able to build a website. To the Secret Service, not even be able to protect the White House, right? Guy jumps the fence, he even has a bad leg, he gets to the front door and found they don't lock the front door of the White House. You know the alarm didn't go off, and you know why the alarm didn't go off? Because they had turned it off. Because the alarm kept going off, and instead of fixing it, they just turned it off. Until it got caught. Now think back to I say that's like the 70s. If you wanted to get gasoline in your car, you couldn't get it anytime you wanted to. It was based upon whether you were an odd or even on your license plate. Well, this is the other thing I should make you think. We had an Ebola scare. We didn't even trust the CDC. The only people we trust today is our military. They are the ones that have been successful. But we made the military be in charge of health care because we didn't trust anybody else within government to do something right. Now think as an American, when was the last time you watched Americans be held hostage? 1979 in Iran. And today, we still have 4 Americans there today, are ISIS down in Yemen, around the world. I think it's going to get worse too, because the president changed the history of this world, or the history of our country, for the first time. Now you can pay ransom. What does that say to everybody else around the world? Take an American, they'll pay ransom. When was the last time a U.S. ambassador was killed on foreign soil? It's a direct reflection of the respect and the fear other countries have. In '79, it was our ambassador in Afghanistan. Then it was Stevens in Libya, just a couple years ago. When was the last time you watched the Soviet Union invade another country? You felt maybe our response was a little weak. They invaded Afghanistan, and now Russia today invades Ukraine. And simply says, they're not Russian troops. You know, I was in Ukraine just a couple months ago. You know Putin puts crematorium in Ukraine so he doesn't send the troops back to Russia. Just says, your boys didn't come home. So he doesn't answer the question. When was the last time we really debated the word malaise? Remember Jimmy Carter had this speech that said we had to accept a new norm. That each generation couldn't improve on a generation before it. That we had to accept that America maybe not be the leaders of the world. But we have that same debate going on today. People will argue, oh, no, but unemployment rate is very low. There's 2 ways to lower unemployment. You put people to work, or they give up looking. 93 million Americans have given up looking. The participation rate today is 62.7%. The lowest participation rate in the workforce since 1978. And let me give you some other scary statistics. One that I hope actually comes true. Jimmy Carter signed the SALT II treaty, but it was never ratified. Reagan ran against it. We actually got a better deal. Jimmy Carter's administration distanced America's relationship with Israel. He distanced it so far that his UN ambassador, Andrew Young, had to resign for lying in meeting with the PLO. Saturday, I leave to go to Israel with a number of members. It'll be an interesting time to be in Israel, because when we come back, we have till September 17th to vote on, which the president did not make a treaty, he made an agreement with Iran. I think of everything we have before us, and there's a lot of big issues, that is the most important issue we have. If Iran is able to have a nuclear weapon, the world will never be the same. And we'll have to look our kids in the eye and say, this is what we did. Now, another interesting fact about that, if I say it's a lot like '79, Jimmy Carter was president in '79, Barack Obama is president today. You know what they have in common? They both won the Nobel Peace Prize. You know who has not won the Nobel Peace Prize? Ronald Reagan. But who brought more freedom to millions around the world? Now people say to me, yeah, but if you don't vote for this Iran agreement, what else can you do? You can get a much better agreement. I'll give you an example. I have a philosophy: peace without freedom is meaningless. Think about that for one moment. Peace without freedom is meaningless. Because there are times in history people strive to just have peace and forget the idea of freedom. We all remember that when that happened, it was right before World War II. Chamber. We have peace in our time. You know, before, after that agreement, when Hitler went to invade again, he brought his generals together, and his generals said, well, what about that agreement? What about the other countries rising up? You know what Hitler said? I looked in their eyes. They don't want to fight. In every negotiation, there is somebody who wants it more than the others. Iran needs an agreement. We do not. It just seems though we want it. Maybe they do not. Reagan, at the end of his term, sat with Gorbachev in Iceland. He got everything he wanted, but he got up and walked away from the table. Why? Because any time you want to negotiate something, what do? At the closing, you throw something out there, a Hail Mary, to really see who wants it worse, right? Something you haven't asked for before, you think it's too far to go. Well, Gorbachev says you have to stop SDI. Reagan thought, well, no. That brings freedom. He said, no, I'm not going to stop SDI, but I'll do this. I'll share it with you. So you can have this technology as well. Gorbachev said no. Reagan got up and walked away from that table. People criticized him. Said he missed his window. Had Reagan walked away, would the Berlin Wall had collapsed? Would the Soviet Union had collapsed? Had we signed SALT II, would the Soviet Union still be here today? There are ramifications for what we do, but we have to think longer term. We got the clock ticking right now to what we do with the Iran agreement. Fundamentally, it is the wrong agreement. I don't disagree with negotiating with them. The reason they came to the table is because of the sanctions. So we should negotiate from strength. Why should Iran be able to have ballistic missiles? Oh, there's no nuclear warheads on it. Not today. But why would they still be able to test them? That's not to send a missile to Iraq or to Israel. It's to send it much further. Why can't we inspect anytime we want? Oh, now it's got to go to a group, and everybody's got to agree except two. Then you have 24 more days waiting. Then you have all this other time. Why? So they can clean something up. You know, I spend my time, I'll travel the Middle East and around the world. I went to Iraq, I went to Saudi Arabia, went to United Arab Emirates, I've been to Ukraine, I've been to Tunisia. All hot spots around the world. When I go to the Middle East, you know what they'll say? I'd rather Iran have a nuclear weapon than give them $100 billion to fund the terrorists around the world. At the same time, we negotiated with the Soviet Union. We were never afraid to call them the evil empire. At the same time we've been negotiating with Iran, they're now in 4 different capitals. They fund our enemies with less money than they have today. Now we're going to let them sell their oil onto the world market, but we can't sell our oil into the world market. We can only sell here in America. I don't think there's anything good about this agreement. What's worse is, I'll bet you a majority in the House votes against it. So it'll go to the president for disapproval, but he'll veto it. So you have to have 2/3 to override it. Why would you ever campaign on an idea that all I got to keep is 1/3 and I can govern and set the course for the world to a whole new path? You know, I was in France a couple months ago, and it's just towards one of the end dates to the negotiations. I never thought there'd be a day where France would lecture us that they're being harder on Iran than we are. But that's exactly what happened. They got up and walked away from the table. Russia even got up and walked away from the table. And we stayed, giving Iran an agreement that's much different. Now, I tell you that not to depress you, because remember what happened after 1979? We changed course. At that time, the late 70s, we were depleting our military. Carter actually woke up before he left the presidency and started putting more money in, because he saw what was happening, being held hostage someplace else and not having the capability. I don't know if the Middle East is going to be the focus if we do this right. I think Asia is going to be more the focus of the world. And we're going to have to be prepared for that. Now, there's no other place you're going to be able to prepare for that than right here. To have this airspace and out to the sea in Point Magoo, we're at a key point. And if it's true at 79, and we're going to make a fundamental change, we're going to wake up. Remember, Winston Churchill always said, you can count on Americans to do what's right after they exhausted every other option. We pretty much exhausted them. So we could be in a right place to help save our country and save it. We just have to make sure we're doing the right thing. So when I take a number of members to Israel, we'll sit with Bibi. We're going to make it a bipartisan. And we're going to make it not a Republican or Democrat, but as an American. What is best for this country and for the world? And I think what's best is to say no and have a better agreement put on the table. Just as Reagan was willing to walk away from Gorbachev, I think if we're willing to say we can have a better agreement, I bet you our allies would cheer us and say, thank God you're back from it. I mean, it's difficult when you travel the world and your friends don't fear you. Your enemies don't fear you and your friends don't trust you. It's a tough place to be. I'll give you one example. You know, when Reagan was president and Marcos in the Philippines was at a time for him to depart, regardless of what you thought of Marcos, wasn't a good man, but he was an ally to America. Our administration called him and said, look, there's a C-130 on the runway. Put all your wife's shoes in there, all the gold. We will take you and you'll find a place to retire. Mubarak's in Egypt, regardless of what you think, he cut ties with the Soviet Union. Israel never had to build a wall along the Sinai, that's their largest border. When he got in trouble, what did we do? We let him rot in jail. So every one of our allies decided, I may need a new friend. So why has Egypt now gone to the Soviet Union to look for weapons? Why does Saudi Arabia now go to Russia? Why does Turkey now try to buy an air defense system from China when they're a part of NATO? We have to stand up to our friends. And that's what takes me to the final. I know we got a presidential race coming in. I think this presidential years, all presidential years are about a vision for the future. Off-year elections are about what's already taken place and whether you agree with it. So whoever's going to win this election has to have a very clear vision, but it's also going to be a foreign policy election. A lot of people come to me and say, well, you got 16, 17 candidates. Is that a lot? Yeah, that's a lot. But I put my partisan hat on. Democrats couldn't field those many candidates. So we got a deep bench. The other thing, well, if it's about foreign policy, you have a lot of governors. They don't have foreign policy. I said, the number one thing about foreign policy, just do what you say you'll do, and you have a strong foreign policy. If people can trust your word, they understand where we'll be. That's the challenge around the world. They don't know if we say one thing today that it'll be the same tomorrow. That's when you get disruption around the world. That's when the world becomes unsafe. People will fear us more if we follow out what we'll say we'll do, because then they won't try it. They'll know where the line in the sand is. When the president said he wanted to go into Syria, because he said they used chemical weapons, he said that was the line in the sand. They had used chemical weapons 11 times earlier that year. Why was this time now? So people on both sides, they question it. I don't understand. So I see a big field. I have no favorites in there. They shouldn't run against each other. They should run for something. You can become popular in today's climate about what you're opposed to, or who you're opposed to. I want to see what people are for. Show me what you see this vision is about. And as I go around the country, you know, it's easy to be angry. But you know, a lot of you have been in my office where I have my Lincoln and my Reagan. You know why I have Lincoln and Reagan in my office? And I have this artist that paints these for me, a guy's named Penley. He's pretty well known artist. And in my conference room, I have that Washington crossing the Delaware. You know why I put Washington crossing Delaware in the conference room? We do a lot of work there. But you all know the picture, right? Where Washington's standing up in the rowboat. Do you know the history of who painted it and why? The original hangs in New York. This is a duplicate. And it was painted by a German artist. He was an immigrant who lived in America for 10 years. So he wasn't there the night of 1776 on Christmas, watching us cross the Delaware and surprise the Hessians, our first big Duke revolution. So he wasn't there, but he wanted to paint it in his mind, right? So they criticized him because the Delaware looked like the Rhine, but he's German. Now in this picture, most people just focus on George Washington. He's standing up, right? He wouldn't have been standing up in the rowboat that night. But it looked like he had never lost a battle. Well, he hadn't won one. But do you know there's 13 people in the picture? Why 13? Yeah. But you only see 12 faces. And next time you see the picture, I want you to look at the people that are in the boat. Because this was his mind of what he saw America. The second person who's rowing wearing a beret, he's Scottish. The person right across from him in the green jacket is African American. Then you come down a little ways and the red jacket is a woman. And in the very back, a Native American. I think probably all were not in the boat that night. But he depicted America as a melting pot. The other thing, they were all rowing in the same direction. But the second to the last person, he has his hand across his face. That's the hand of the 13th person that you do not see. And what the artist wanted to depict to everybody, here are these people. America's a melting pot. They risked everything for liberty and freedom, not only for themselves, but for you, having never won before. Here's a hand. Will you get in the boat and join me? And I put that at my conference, the idea that's where we do a lot of our work, so we don't forget what we're rowing to or where we're rowing to get to. And that we're willing to risk that others have risked before. But then when you come into the office and you see Lincoln and Reagan, my two favorite presidents, and Lincoln's in black and white because of what was happening in the country during that. But I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time in the office, and late at night I was a little crazy. I always wonder, what would these two men tell us today, right? I'll give you this advice. Lincoln would tell us, believe in the exceptionalism of this country. That we're different than any other country before us. And don't be afraid of it. Embrace that. And the reason why I think Lincoln would say that is the Gettysburg Address. You know it, 7 years ago. But you ever listen to the other words? He wasn't even the main speaker. That our forefathers brought forth a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated the proposition that all men are created equal. He goes on to say, but government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish. He says, if we fail, government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from earth. He did not say, if we fail, don't worry, France or England would pick up the torch, because they're not conceived in liberty and dedicated the proposition that we're all equal. We are different than every other country before us. And you know when that hit home? It wasn't when an American brought it up to me, but it was a leader of another country. I was in the rotunda, and Shimon Peres comes in, and we're giving him a Congressional Medal of Honor. He's 92 years old. He's in his last term of president of Israel. Think of it. When he was born, his country wasn't even created yet. He watched the creation of his country. He watched the battles. He fought in them, the wars, to sustain his country. And he stands before us and he says, you live in the greatest country that's ever been on the face of the earth. Not the greatest country of our time, but in the face of the earth. Because you know, Your greatness doesn't come for what you take, but it's what you give. That you will give the ultimate sacrifice of life so another country could have freedom. And with that freedom becomes human rights and a stronger economy. That's who we are. There's been no other country like that. Every other country would conquer to take. We risk lives so others can live. There's a reason why we're supposed to lead. And there's a reason why we have to put ourselves in a position that we still can lead. The next bit of advice, Lincoln would tell us, don't blame others for where you currently stand. No matter how big the problem is, find a solution to move forward. You know, the debate of slavery didn't start with Lincoln. It didn't start in 1850. It started the creation of our country. But our forefathers said it was too divisive. So they put it off. By putting it off, hundreds of thousands of their grandchildren had to die. He solved the problem. Solved the problem. Don't blame others for it. You know what? In all the time of Lincoln, he never once blamed Buchanan. You know, before he entered, got sworn in and got elected, 7 states left the Union. The last bit of advice I'd tell you from Reagan, he's in color and smiling. The best bit of advice, if I put a partisan hat on, if you're conservative, be a happy conservative. Angry conservatives, yeah, they'll get people, yeah, finally someone's fighting. But it gets you a small group. Reagan was a happy conservative. Why? Because he knew his policy brought people greater freedom and liberty. So you should be happy about where you stand, but you know what? More people will want to know why you're happy. More people might believe what you're fighting for. So, that's my last bit of advice. I thank you for the opportunity. I want to work with you to make sure this city is in the right place for the future as well. This happens to be, to me, I think, my second home. It's important for me personally, but I think it's important for the nation and the world. This base is more than just a base. This base will determine where we are as a country. You can't duplicate it anywhere else. So don't look at it just as economic. We've got to make sure we have what it needs, that that base always has the opportunity. But it can be economic at the same time. So how do we make sure and ensure that? We should do leadership at Ridgecrest. We should make sure USO, that they understand the support that we have for them. And we should also have a one-stop shop. So if somebody wants to do business on that base, it's easy to open up here. And that's how economic is. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you're giving us sort of a national, international perspective, because that's something that us on the civilian side of the world maybe don't think about as much as our neighbors to the north of us. But one of the issues that I think has really restricted California is our trying to resolve the drought crisis.
Yes.
And I want to...
Thank you for bringing that back. That was on my list to bring up.
I was sure you wanted to talk about this. So I think my greater concern, a lot of people have mentioned that it's a water management problem. It's not necessarily a water availability problem. We've done a lot of things that may have worsened our situation by not providing the storage and the transmission that we need. But I guess what can we do now in the face of, I think we haven't really begun to feel the negative impact of not growing food. And I think that between food availability and
you got food
prices,
safety, food availability.
So how can we act quickly enough that this doesn't turn into a bigger crisis than it needs to?
Great question. You guys haven't talked about water out here at all, have you? I apologize for bringing it up. We passed a bill in the House. The sad part is, we passed a bill in the last 2 Congress for the last 4 years. 5 years ago in California, there was 172% snowpack. But do you know, there's two ways to move water down, the federal and state projects, but only 80% was allocated. Even though people pay for 100%, today they're getting 0%. We have not built a new dam or water storage in how many years? But the population continues to grow. So our bill is kind of simple. It does four things. And I've actually worked closely with Feinstein on this. Boxer. I can't remember the name. We just get in shouting matches. You got to have greater storage. Because California has gone through droughts before. Scientists are saying it's going to be an El Nino next year. And the worst thing, we've gone through this before. We're about to do desal and everything else. I support desal, but think of this. What does desal do? Desal takes salt water and makes it fresh water. But do you know, even today, we take our fresh water and we let it go out to be salt water? Shouldn't we first protect our fresh water before we spend money to switch it back? So we need greater storage, and the greatest return on the investment is actually to raise the level of current dams. There's 5 of them that have been sitting for more than a decade for approval. Best return on the investment you can spend anywhere, right? And even if you have El Nino next year, don't think our water problems are away. We need 3 years of it. Now we're a little different out here in this office of whether we get replenished or not, if we can have that debate. But we need to be able to have storage. Okay? So first part, have storage. Second is, snowpack comes from the north, we grow in the Central Valley, and the population's in the south. But if you can't move the water through, there's no use of having it anyways. The delta is the place we have to move it. But because of a court case and because of the environmental laws, this little delta smelt, as you go to turn on the pumps, what happens? It brings up dirt and others. Well, that attracts the smelt. They say, oh my God, you're killing them. So you got to turn it off. Then the water goes out to the oceans. I actually fundamentally think if we're going to live on this earth, we're going to have to make choices. And we can pump at different levels, and we can move that water through. And we should make sure the return on investment is smart. We spent, what, $100 million on dealing with a few salmon coming back, and we haven't even done one of them. And now they're taking about the water temperature, and now they found out they're 2 degrees off the water temperature. I think you move water, fish will find a way. It's happened every time before, it'll be okay. So you got to have movement down. Then we got to protect water rights. That's a challenge. And the State Water Project. Those are the 4 things this bill does. It doesn't repeal the Endangered Species Act, which I would want to do. But I found common ground because at the end of the day, we have to get something done. And we sent that to the Senate. We made it easier for them to accept, and now we're going to push to see what we get through. I started working on this bill even before we were sworn in. I went over to the Senate and switched. I went through, I sat down, and I made it a more national or Western water issue. Because California is not the only one in the water crisis. It's kind of throughout the West. And so if we can help everybody else as well, that gives it a better opportunity that more people will vote for it. Because the Senate has these very strange rules that you got to get to 60. But that's where we're going. And thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Councilman, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks
Anytime you're
me.
back in Ridgecrest, give us a shout and we'll be happy to talk to you again.
Well, thank you.
All right? Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Appreciate
it.
it.
And thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.